personal. And I'll also pull up a slide that shows this. So as people come in, they can start putting it in there. But just to get the vibes going while people are trickling in, that's what I want to know about, is what was something good from this week. One business, or sorry, not one business, one thing personal, and one good thing from your workshop. All right, so as people are trickling in, we're going to give them another minute or two to arrive. This is just going to be for level 1 facilitators. So that's going to include, no, from your workshop last week, your workshop with the students. So Bojo, I know that was a little different for you, but for everybody else, I'm looking for one good thing from your workshop last week and one good thing personal. And I'll focus on letting people in as they arrive. Chris, if you could send me a private message about everybody who's in level 1 who we're expecting to come at 5:30 today. I know it's a little bit shy on the number of people we're expecting, so I think they're just trickling in. But go ahead and put one thing good from like your personal life and one good thing from your workshop last week. For me, and I'll put it in the chat also, personal, I got to hang out in Venice Beach and watch a lot of skateboarding. And then for workshop, one thing that I really loved from last week's workshops, I got a little bit of a different perspective, but I got to see all the facilitators in action. And that was my favorite thing from our workshops last week. So I'm going to go ahead and enter that into the chat. As you arrive, please go ahead and put something great from your personal life so that we all get to know each other a little bit, and something great from your workshop. Kathleen, congratulations. I love it. I love it.
Thank you.
What's your new job?
A controller position at a talent management company based in Los Angeles. I work remote, so that's really nice.
Yeah.
But I'm excited because it's a talent management firm for influencers. And so, like, perhaps, like, one thing that was mentioned is like perhaps I could like get on the roster one day. So
Ooh, very cool. Oh, that's awesome. Very cool.
yeah, I'm working on my my page.
Yeah, I love it. I do see you. I do see you out there making your videos. So I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
Love that. And I also love that you enjoyed the subject matter too. I always like that question about the 3-year plan idea thing. I always think or 1 year in this case, but normally I think of it in 3 years for myself. I'm like, 3 years, if everything went right, where would I be? And I always love using that as an evaluation for like, where do I want to go? What would make these next years really great? So I always learn a lot too. Bryson, Bojo, Haley. Oh, did Bryson? Oh, Bryson's there. Anybody adding anything to the chat? The one good thing personal, one good thing business. I don't think I see any other things in here yet. You can also just unmic and tell me what's on your mind. Ooh. All right. So Bryson says, I love hearing the perspective of the younger generation and their outlook on topics. I like that. Started planning an event to premiere his first film. I love it. I love that. I'm excited. Can I come to your event, Bryson?
You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's October 1st. If you can make it to LA, I would love to have you there.
I love it. That's very exciting. Haley got to travel home and see her family this weekend. Where's your home, Haley?
I am in Kansas City right now.
Oh, really? That is different from New York.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Awesome. Oh, I love it. The students who having the ideal mindset idea. I love that. I loved your workshop too. I loved all of your workshops. I thought it was a really great week. We're going to go ahead and go through a couple highlights from last week. One, I just want to bring up something that one of the students said in their response of the surveys after the workshop. So they wrote, the most valuable part of the workshop was engaging with others and having my stories heard and validated. I've gotten used to being silent and watching from the sidelines, but having these open discussions helps a lot. So I think that was a really awesome thing to hear from our students in level 1. And another couple quick things. We do have some survey stuff. We're going to get a little better at our surveys and get that information to you. But overall, people mostly said it was either very engaging or engaging. There's a chunk here that's somewhat engaging, but mostly people were a fan. What we are going to do is we're going to try to figure out what was not engaging and get that information to you all. We might not have that this week, but we might tweak our survey a little bit to make that information more valuable. Experience of the total workshop, 63% said absolutely excellent, and then 33% said good, the rest said average. But it just gives you a little taste of how our students are experiencing the material. Yeah, I think, yes, there was some confusion around the Zoom links. I appreciate you all being here. Thank you. I love Bojo said last week's debacle reaffirmed his desire to do this, and it taught him to adjust his approach a little bit. And I thought that was a really astute point you made too during the last week as well, during our training on Saturday, about how you would approach this very differently now than you would have before, knowing that it's not like a set of executives that you normally work with who already know so much and know what they're doing, and it's much more about that engagement and back and forth. So thank you for sharing some of your thoughts on last week. And we're going to dive into the lesson for this week. This week is going to be see what you're missing. I'm going to cover this first in a set of like a minute and a half, and then we're going to go back and walk through it. But all right, I'm starting. You're going to cover what happened last week. Though this week, we're going to focus on thinking traps. We're going to focus on how your brain filters information and how harnessing self-talk and affirmations can help rewire some of those filtrations people already have. So we'll start by talking about stubbornness and what stubbornness is and what it can be caused by, whether it's confirmation bias or how our brains are kind of wired to make sense of the world around us and validate what we already know. So that's how stubbornness happens. And we're just having people kind of loosen up a little bit and think about, okay, so how do you get out of that stubbornness trap? We're going to watch the gorilla video, the gorilla basketball video, which if you haven't seen, you're going to see this week. Sorry, I spoiled it for you, but this video about selective attention. We'll talk a little bit about how selective attention works and how a brain can only process so much at a time, and what we've most recently interacted with or most recently been thinking about helps bring things to the forefront of our brain. Then we're going to talk about hacking our brain's algorithm. So we're going to talk about it a lot like a social media algorithm. If you watch one thing, it shows you more videos of that kind of thing. And similarly, our brain, once it starts looking for certain things, those things start popping up all the time. And this is going to help students learn how to identify a little bit better what filters they have in place and how to start cracking that code so they can redirect those filters. So we're going to talk about limiting beliefs and reframing the question. We're going to end with affirmations and self-talk and how taking that, going from here, like hacking that brain algorithm and reframing questions and move that over into, okay, let's create some things you can say to yourself on a regular basis. You'll talk about next class, and that's about the class for this upcoming week. So in a quick overview, that's the overarching view of this workshop. Before we dive in, going a little bit slower through things, does anyone have any questions about any of this? Okay. So here's the thing. I think the biggest obstacles in this, there's going to be two obstacles that I see. Number one, Time management. There's a lot of information in here, and figuring out how to pace yourself, how to make sure everyone gets a chance to work through things, that is going to be the biggest, I think, hurdle. So I would suggest when planning for yourself, try to figure out about how long you want to spend on each of those key points. And then as you've experienced, there's about a minute to a minute and a half of time for those workbook questions. So factoring in however long you want to spend on each of these topics, plus 1 to 2 minutes of workbook questions, and then following up with people in the class, that will help you decide like, okay, here's how long I have, and then here's how long I want to have breakout rooms for. So people discussed on Saturday a few different options for breakout rooms. Some people talked about maybe launching them at the beginning of the workshop, having a breakout room right at the outset to have people share thoughts, open up at the beginning, and then go into the material. And some people lean into using breakout rooms at the end of the workshop once we've discussed everything. So I think there's a couple options there, but I do think time management is going to be an issue. If you want to go through and you realize we just can't do breakout rooms today, that's fine. I would just say focus on having great conversations in the large group forum. People really like that interaction, so lean into where you can get that interaction. The other thing that is challenging about this workshop today will be vulnerability. A lot of the questions we ask in this workshop in particular are very, very vulnerable. So I invite you all as presenters to be thinking when we come to these workbook questions, what is a way I can show some vulnerability, ideally in a way that's relatable to these students, and help share some of that so that they feel okay being more vulnerable. And then I would say for actually asking the questions of the group, shift it away a little bit so that the questions are less, what is a limiting belief you have, to something like, have you seen a character in a TV show or a movie have a limiting belief? Or do you know anyone who you've experienced has a limiting belief? Or what do you think are typical limiting beliefs of people who are your age right now? So move it away from that, like forcing them to be super vulnerable, to that kind of adjustment. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to do that as we go through. But those are going to be, I think, the two biggest challenges for this workshop. Anyone have any questions or any thoughts on those ideas? I think you can. So Jay asks in the chat, should we not ask them to share personally? And or only if they're too shy. I think it depends a little bit. I think that different cohorts are going to respond differently. I think the afternoon cohorts will be more comfortable sharing than the during school cohorts. So I think you can ask them to share their responses to these questions and just see who speaks up. And if no one's willing to, or they're too uncomfortable, then shifting it, that's a totally fair way to do it, I think. I think if you read these and you're nervous about it yourself, you're like, I don't think I'd want to share this. I don't want to put students in a position you wouldn't want to put yourself in. And so I think I would also encourage you to be ready to be vulnerable also. And that a lot of growth and excitement can come from that vulnerability. But if you're reading it and you're like, I wouldn't feel comfortable sharing this, I would say don't put a student in a position you wouldn't want to be in yourself. But I think those are good questions. I tend to go deep kind of fast, so I might just ask them the questions as they are. Any other questions there?
When you guys do breakout rooms, what's like the typical size for like number of participants?
Yeah, so that's going to depend on a couple of things. Number one is we view it as much more beneficial to have breakout rooms relative to the number of people who can actually run breakout rooms. So right now at this point in the year, we don't have as many as we will later in the year. So we've got the alumni, we've got our staff. And then I would say, okay, then limit it to the number of people who can effectively run a breakout room. So that could be 5 people in each breakout room. It could be 10, depending on that mix. So you can talk with your specific staff in advance of going into the meeting and be like, hey, based off of what attendance we had last week, how many breakout rooms do you think we can have this week?
Perfect. That makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or ideas before we walk a little more slowly through this? Okay, awesome. All right, so we will go through this fairly quickly because the goal will be to have you out of here in 15 minutes. And this is, here we're going to talk about stubbornness. And the idea is stubbornness holding you back? So what is stubbornness and how is it built? So stubbornness can be created by a multitude of things. It can be created by the beliefs we've heard. It can be created by our experiences that we've had that build up a sense of understanding of the world around us that might not be 100% true. So it's the idea of realizing that some of what we've built up over time might not actually be right or might not be the most helpful for us anymore. So some of the things that we talk about here are going to be things like confirmation bias, which is basically saying we naturally seek and believe information that supports existing ideas. Cognitive dissonance says that when we hear something new, that threatens what we understand in the world, we tend to ignore it or deny it instead of adapting to new information as it comes in. So essentially, our brains are wired to, I loved this quote I read somewhere, like, oh, your brain is wired to be a survival machine, not a truth machine. And I think that that is very, very accurate in a lot of ways. Our brains are looking to survive. And sometimes some of the ideas and thoughts that we've created over time to survive at different times in our life are no longer what helps us survive now, but it's really hard to overcome that. So this is about figuring out how do we start breaking that down. So we're going to start with a question now that we've talked a little bit about it. We open it up with, think of a time when you disagreed or when someone disagreed with you and gave you feedback. Did you consider their perspective or reject it right away? What did you learn? So for me, I have this experience all the time, and I'm going to think of some better ones for high schoolers, but the number one way is in feedback I get at work. So getting feedback at work, sometimes there's things where I'm like, I disagree with that assessment, but also there's some truth there. There's some ideas there that I do need to be open to. So sometimes the way, like, and I think this is very relatable, I think, for many people, that I need to take a step back. And if I have an initial emotional reaction saying, no, how can that be? That's incorrect. You got me wrong. To process it a little longer so that I can see where the truth is in the statement they may have given me. So this one is the least vulnerable of all the questions. And I think it's actually pretty easy for people to answer. So I would say definitely come up with something for this whole workshop. I would say definitely give an example yourself before diving into the workbook question. Again, because a lot of this does get to, like, what we're telling people is your brain might not be like, you might need to adjust some of your thinking, which is a hard pill to swallow for me, for sure. And I think for a lot of people. So I think walking gently into it by giving examples and showing that vulnerability ourselves is important. You'll show this gorilla video. And this is about how if you are thinking about one thing and really focused on one thing, you might miss other things that are obvious. I'm not going to show the video now, but kids are passing basketballs around and then a gorilla walks through and people see the people passing the basketball, but not the gorilla. And we're going to talk about selective attention. Our brain has limited processing space. So we can only see or absorb so much information at once, and it's often primed. So we're seeing information that relates to what we've thought about recently, we've been told recently, whatever it may be. And then we start seeing that everywhere often. And so talking a little bit about why we miss things so that they understand a little bit about the brain science behind it. But also some of the examples here. So if you're convinced your teacher doesn't like you, you'll notice every frown and you'll see all the things that validate that they don't like you. But you might not notice when they're doing things that are supportive or show you that they do like you. So focus can blind people to parts of truth. So that's the main point about perception and priming. And then I do think this one is a little bit tricky. This question itself is tricky, and I'll give you what my example is. This talks about, think about a recent example or a recent situation where you focus so hard on one thing that you missed something else important, even if it was small. And for me, I overthink this question. I'm like, oh yeah, it's like, how would I know? How can I really think about what my blind spots are and what I missed? Because if I missed it, then how did, like, I wouldn't know what it is now. But I think the easiest way for me to think of this is mistakes I've made. So I think one that came to mind immediately was when I had to talk to I was given an email, said like, hey, go meet this person. This is all their background. And as I started reading it, I was like, awesome. My brain jumped 5 steps ahead. I thought I knew exactly what I was supposed to get out of this person and what I was asking for and what they wanted from me and all that. But I just didn't read all the way to the end of the email because I'd already decided I knew enough. Like, I've got it. I understand. And there was a small sentence at the end that said, they might want to be a board member. And so it didn't even occur to me when I was reading all these other things about the events they do and all these things that I should be asking them to be a board member. And I got into this meeting and people were like waiting for me to make the ask. And I just wasn't doing it because I didn't even realize that was on the agenda. And that was something very important that I missed. Ended up working out okay, but that I had made so many assumptions about what was necessary, what I needed to do, that I missed one fact that was important, but was buried in a lot of other information. I think a more simple way to think of it is like if someone's waving at you and you don't see because you're really focused on texting or on typing or whatever it may be. So it is a little bit of a funky question, but I would say lean into easier examples. Some other easy examples could be like getting so focused on a test that you forgot it was your friend's birthday, or something where it's just like, oh, I got really into this one thing and the other details just fell to the side. So again, I would start with your own example and then dive into this workbook question. Any questions so far? We're 2 key points in, we still have 2 more. Any questions on any of this? Y'all can also feel free to put things in the chat too, while I'm talking so that we can answer questions as we go. I am happy to do that. And then we start talking about hacking your brain's algorithm. So we relate a brain to a social media algorithm where once a person starts paying attention to one thing, all those things start popping up all the time. And that's how social media is built. But it's also helpful to know that that's also kind of how our brains work. We filter information that comes through, and we're mostly filtering for 2 things that are valuable and things that are threatening. And the things that we value or fear shape what we notice. So if we are really afraid of one thing or really into one thing, that's the only thing we'll see. So this helps give us a reference point for how our brains currently work and what we may need to do to rewrite that code. So we talk about setting goals, setting clear understandings of what we want, and start eliminating the things we don't want. So our brain is focusing more often on those things that we really want to achieve or that are really positive or really supportive. Contrasting experiences are where you see where you are now and where you will be, where you want to be, and helps give that gap to be like, oh, okay, I can see where I want to end up is different from what I'm doing right now. And how to get there is like, if you can have a really clear vision of what you want in the future and a really clear vision of who you are now, you're more likely to be able to get to that vision in the future. So this is the last part we'll talk about here in Hacking Your Brain's Algorithm. It talks about having limiting beliefs and choosing to reframe it with a question. So instead of just saying, get rid of the negative beliefs, it's saying, hey, ask questions about these beliefs. So saying, I'm not creative. Try exploring what does creativity look like for you. And for me, I know that was when I was in 4th grade, James Gallup told me I would never be an artist or creative because I wasn't left-handed. And so I know that moment, like for me, was a moment that shaped my understanding of what I could do and what just naturally, what I was capable of. So for me, I know that that was my moment of a limiting belief. And there's so many questions I can ask now. Questions that I would ask now that I wouldn't have asked then. Like, what did a 9-year-old know about how left-handedness factored in with this? And I let this other peer of mine decide so much for me. But that would be my example. And then here's a workbook question. And here's where it starts getting more vulnerable. Take a look at the examples of beliefs you may have experienced. Select one that feels true to you and create one, or create one that feels true to you. And then what's a question you can ask now about this statement to help you start to redo it? So for me with creativity, it would be, what did this person know about creativity? That would be one question, but that's a side question. But how might I be creative? What are other ways I see myself as being creative? So things that question what he may have said. Self-talk shapes your reality. This is the belief that once you start saying something to yourself regularly, this starts to become your new reality. So affirmations, positive tense, reframe who you are today with this idea of who you will be in the future, and start using that to shape and hone in on your new reality. So this is another vulnerable one. Write down one self-critical thought you've had recently, then rewrite it as a replacement picture that supports growth and effort. So for example, I talk too much versus I bring energy and ideas to conversation and I listen to others. So again, this is one where I would give an example first and then lean into providing, like allowing them to be vulnerable if they want to, but also reframing the question if you're not getting any shares. So that's the end of this workshop. There's next class, and then there'll be announcements with the staff we'll take care of. But are there any other questions or thoughts on this workshop?
Yeah, Michelle, question on like just understand the students a little bit more.
Yeah.
We were in the networking event. I do think like some people were interested in like AI and whatnot. And like that's obviously my background. When I think about algorithms, the first thing that pops into my head is ChatGPT, like how they use the algorithm and how that feedback, like how far off is that to share like technology and like how algorithms are like built and how that's like honestly in parallel to like how humans work. That's the whole point of ChatGPT is to get to that point. I don't know.
Yeah, I would invite anyone who is an expert in any area and they know it's relatable to a topic. Feel free to bring in anything you're an expert in.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's super relevant, right? Because we're talking about prompts and framing questions and like probing a model to get somewhere, right? It's like, what questions are you asking?
Yeah.
I
That's
mean,
my
for ChatGPT, obviously, like the feedback loop of it, it's like you want to continue to iterate. ChatGPT 5 is very different than where it started, and it's continuing on the research. And so, but I don't want to be like so off base. It's just like, girl, shut up. Like, we don't want to know how ChatGPT works. we just use it for whatever we need it to, our homework. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Or thoughts or concerns? Okay. Well, that's it. So mostly wanted to introduce you to the material and also point out some potential trouble areas that I think could come up in this particular lesson. But otherwise, I think y'all are good to go. If you want to hang out for the level 2 stuff, feel free. If you are ready to head out, that's great too. If you're in LA, you should come to trivia tonight. But otherwise, I think that's all for now.
Have fun.
All right, thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
In the chat, one thing personal that's going really good for you this last week, and one thing you really loved about your workshop. And so go ahead and throw that into the chat.